Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Welcome to All Things Policy. We're recording this episode on the 11th of October. It's now a little over a year since a mass casualty attack by Hamas on Israel has resulted in this large conflict, which doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. And the region that we call the Middle East and North Africa, again, seems to be mired in conflict. But of course, things are a lot more complicated. This is a vast region with a lot of different trends and counter trends that are going on simultaneously. And to understand it better, I'm thrilled today to be joined by Muhammad Alaraby. He's head of strategic foresight at the Future Center, UAE. He's an award-winning Egyptian researcher. He's got a bunch of publications under his belt. He'll be talking to us today entirely in his own personal capacity. So we're hoping to have a freewheeling conversation about the region, about its prospects. So welcome to All Things Policy, Muhammad.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you for having me and for your institute. Actually, it is a great pleasure to be here with you. And actually, let me tell you that this is my first time in a public podcast, actually, so I'm a little bit nervous about being here. But I think it is good time to talk about the regional development and the aftermath of this ever expanding and growing war. I think we need to highlight many points between facts and different perspective of this growing conflict in the region.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why I'm so thrilled that we're having this conversation. I mean, it is a grim subject, but we should get into it. So, I mean, a little over a year back, Muhammad, a lot of us, at least in India, we were looking forward to this new era of peaceful commerce in the region, and but the war that's been triggered has it affected these broader prospects for peace, for trade, for interconnectivity in the Middle East and North Africa?
Yes, actually, as you said, the region has always has this big potentials for free trade, common interest in commerce and perspective of its populations and peoples. Of course, the huge potential of raw materials, its geographic location on the international passages of trade between the East and the West, India and Europe, China and Europe also, and Africa, of course. But actually, I think there was, let's say, a naive belief in this region that if we focus more on the trade, the economic prosperity of the region, we will ended up with having these conflicts in the region vanished all of a sudden. I think this belief, which is mainly invested more by let's say, Israel and the Western powers, especially the UAE, under the label of economic peace in the region, was naive in some way or another, because for many reasons it was tried before and failed. And also it ignores the fact that you cannot build a facade of economic prosperity on the fact that you have this unfinished business of civil wars, for example, in Libya, Syria, Yemen, of course, and Yemen especially because it is in the center of this location of trade between Africa and Asia and the middle of the Middle East and all of the region countries in fact. So having this, and also the epicenter of the conflict, which is mainly ignored by this power engaged in this perspective, which is the occupation of Palestine. So the thing that most of these conflicts in the region, unfinished business before this year, was mainly caused by one of the great reasons of instability of the region, which is the foreign intervention, international interventions. And if you take some moments of the development of the region, starting of the very moment of its establishment as a region, Middle East, in the aftermath of the First World War, Sykes-Picot agreements, and then we have the establishment of Israel in Palestine, and then we have the 6-day war in 1967, and then the biggest transformation of the region by the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. All of these moments were caused by international intervention, mainly Western intervention, and mainly, let's say, in the last half of century, by the American intervention and influence of the region. So these are the people who are promoting this idea of economic peace. They actually caused a chaos in the region, this instability in most of its countries and across its, in the Middle East and North Africa, and both cases of Libya, Syria, Iraq before. And at the same time, they cannot solve the aftermath of this, the repercussions of this instability, and then they thought in another idea. Let's do an economic peace. But actually, the very people who started this line of thought and solving the region's problem for good was the Israelis in the 90s. Actually, and I think in the mid 90s, Shimon Peres would come with this idea of the Great Middle East, in which he said that, okay, we can deal with the Palestinians, but leave them aside. Let's focus on economic prosperity by bringing the Israeli technology with the Gulf money, financial resources, and with the other Arab countries' workforce. And let's make like a great Middle East, a new Middle East. And by itself, the Palestinian problem will be solved. And this was naive, because after that we had like the failure of the peace process, Oslo peace process, and we have the second Intifada, and then some ensuing wars and clashes between Israel, Hezbollah, and Israel and Hamas many times until this last confrontation. I think this is deeply rooted in the belief that you can bribe the people, and you can just by transform conflict into market, which is when market need people to be integrated and to be consumers and can be bribed by just financial benefits, and they will forget their dismay, the calamities inflicted by them by foreign colonizer or occupation forces. And this is the case of the conflict right now. What happened in the 7th of October, actually, it disrupted this perspective. It proved many facts. One of them, for example, that the Palestinian problem, which caused mainly after the Nakba in 1948, for some times in the following decades, it was being said that the main problem of the Arab world. And after the 2003 American occupation of Iraq, it like backtracked to the back seats to other problems in Iraq, and then civil wars in Libya, Syria, Yemen, and disorder in Egypt after 2011. What happened that it is said, the people and the Palestinian people were trying to say that you cannot ignore us. Let's say that this would, and they said that in a term of violence, because they didn't have any other option to say that by any other way, because the under siege in Gaza and under the settler occupation in the West Bank. At the same time, it said also that you cannot separate the region's problem from each other. Now we are seeing, for example, that the conflict is expanding to the Hezbollah, with the confrontation with Hezbollah, because the business, there is an unfinished business between Hezbollah and Israel since 2006, and it is now overlapping with the great geopolitical picture of Iran contesting Israeli supremacy over the region. So, and also I think it debunked this belief in the final analysis. So you cannot build these economic prosperity schemes either with let's say, with building markets in the occupied areas or creating passage for trade between, but let's say, India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and then Europe, and ignoring just that you have conflicts you need to deal with them at first. So geopolitics, I think, is much more important in decisions than geoeconomics.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you've put this so plainly. In a sense, the economics was an attempt to bribe people, and it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other way we would simply put it is, if you assume that that economics can trump politics,
Yeah.
you're going to end up with terrible outcomes, and that's what we've seen over the last 1 year. And I just want to step back very quickly. And I mean, you work in Abu Dhabi, but you're Egyptian, so I just want to ask you, because we don't hear about this much in India, at least. Egypt obviously has a special interest in this conflict. I mean, you border both
Yes.
Israel and Gaza. How is this being seen in Egypt? I have to assume there is a lot of public anger, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, actually, what happened that the attacks of 7th of October happened after the 50 years of the 6th October war in 1973 between Israel and Egypt. And it started also by Egyptian and Syrian coordinated attack to regain the lands that were lost for Israel in 1967. So this like strike a nerve at the Egyptian people. Many people saw it as also an act of liberation against occupation, the siege, the an Israeli operation in Palestine and in general. So we have seen over the course of the conflict in the last year that many people became more sympathetic with the Palestinians. The Palestinian cause gained a very momentum at the Egyptian people in the street, and especially in the younger generation. Because actually, let me tell you, I remember I was 13 in 2001 when the second Intifada erupted, and I wouldn't say political thought, but my perspective of the world was formed by this event. It was huge, it was brutal, and it was bloody for us to see this over TV. And actually, we were very mobilized against Israel as a state, as an occupant state in the region. And after that, I thought that with, let's say, technology, globalization, the prevalence of Western values and Western way of life among the Arab population, especially the younger population, the millennial and then the Gen Z, I thought that the people will forget about this cause, about that we still now we have part of our Arab lands and our neighbors and our brother people, Palestinians, under occupation. But what happened that Israelis created this momentum again between the Gen Z in Egypt, and I think for more in the most of the Arab societies. I mean, Egyptians are not exception, but they are more sympathetic with the Palestinian for two reasons. One related to the geography, and one related also to the demographics, and there is demographic overlapping between Gazans and people of Sinai, and many people in Egypt have this dual nationalities, Egyptian and Palestinian. I discovered actually in the first days of the war that many Egyptians are living in Gaza and they need to evacuate it. And in the first days of the war, the attack actually, Israelis were attacked in Egypt. Some of them were killed. Yeah. So the feelings of anger, feeling of sympathy with the Palestinians are arising now in Egypt, and there is huge campaigns of solidarity, of course, with Palestinians. But when it comes to the Egyptian state, it's a different situation. So for the people, it is very easy to sympathize and to provide the available assistance to the Palestinians. But for Egyptian state has many calculations to deal with. So first of all, as a state, having many problems of uh, economic hardships, and Egypt also in the last decade hosted many refugees from Syria, from Sudan after the civil war in Sudan erupted in April last year also. So this can become kind of a pressure on the available resources, and we have like a financial dire situation mainly caused by the mismanagement of the economy over the last decade. So, having these economic hardships, Egypt was the least party to actor to need this conflict at its eastern doorstep. But it needs to deal with that. So it played the role of the mediator and the ceasefire negotiations between Hamas and Israel. But I think because of the economic hardships and the deterioration in the institutions in Egypt itself over the last decade, especially after 2011, Egypt has lost many tools to pressure the situation around itself. I mean, as an regional actor, it lost a lot of its influence for other regional powers, especially in the Gulf, of course, and of course for Iran and Turkey. During the civil wars in Syria, in the surrounding countries, Egypt chose wisely to enact an passive strategy, that it chose to, it will not intervene in this conflict like other powers in the region. But I said back then that Egypt can avoid the damage of the conflict, but it will not gain the benefits of peace after that. And this choice somehow paid off, indeed. But when it comes to Palestine, it is very hard to ignore that you need this war to end right now, because with this war lingering on, you have like these attacks of the Houthis in the Red Sea, which is going to block the Suez Canal and the trade in the Suez Canal, which make more pressure on the Egyptian financial resources if the conflicts escalate more and more. So Israel could find itself in a situation that it needs to invest more in its defense capacities to defend itself, which will make also more pressure on its financial resources. So the thing that for now Egypt needs to end this conflict, but the dilemma that it lacks the powerful tools to not to end that, but to, for example, to mobilize as a regional power to pressure the Americans that we need to end it right now and for good. And this is the dilemma of the Egyptian situation as a state.
Yeah, it's not a easy position to be in. I mean, when
Indeed, yes.
have that solidarity with the Palestinian cause, but also have other responsibilities of state to handle.
Indeed,
You'd
yes.
mentioned like yeah, you'd mentioned about how the conflict doesn't seem to be ending. What are the key risks that we're seeing over the next 1 year? I mean, to my mind, just as a lay observer, I don't see how the Israelis are going to get out of Gaza anytime soon. Perhaps they're going to continue a presence in South Lebanon. How does this end? I mean, I assume that the risks are still there, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, actually, many people since the 7th of October are saying that we are heading to a regional war if this escalates and does this and the other does that. But actually, I think, and I wrote this like 2 months ago, that we are in the situation of a regional war. Uh, Not all out one, not in the style of, let's say, the interstate wars before, but the idea that we have a war, we have a conflict that going on without any prospect. The idea that the Israelis are fighting without any strategy, they don't have any specific political gains. They are, let's say, mission creep. For example, they started by saying that we need to destroy Hamas, so we cannot destroy Hamas for not right now. Okay, let's try to destroy someone else and Hezbollah and Lebanon, and they cannot destroy Hezbollah and Lebanon, because the idea that if you need to destroy these organizations, you need to dismantle the social surroundings. I mean, the Shia in the south, in Janub, in Lebanon, and the Palestinians and in Gaza. And the idea that for now, for example, Egypt refused vehemently and very serious way, they will not accept Palestinians again as refugees in Sinai, as the Israelis wishes. So they cannot dismantle this organization because they cannot get away from the population that are producing this organization to defend them in a simple way. The idea now, they are trying to, I think they're in the game to provoke a regional conflict and inviting the US to defend Israel, which is creating also a dilemma for both Israel and the US by attacking Iran. So when it comes to the risk for right now, I cannot talk actually about the next year, but okay, I can tell you that for now the world is holding its breath, waiting for the Israeli response on the Iranian missile attack that happened in the 1st of October. So we have a huge risk if the Israelis attack the nuclear facilities of Iran. Iran will find many excuses to get rid of any restriction that put them away from the nuclear bomb. And this will trigger a nuclear arms race in the region, which is a doomsday scenarios, because we don't have the regional security infrastructure that can organize the use or the possession of these arms. So we will have to deal in the coming years, I mean, with the risk of nuclear warfare in the region, which is a doomsday. And another doomsday scenario also coming from the region, I also have this idea. I'm not sure if it is realistic and one, but we are living in an overlapping world. That the conflict in Gaza now overlapping with the a war in Lebanon and a war between Iran and Israel, it could also overlap with the conflict in Ukraine, and the other one would be conflict and let's say between Taiwan and China, because the same actors have interest in the region. I mean, China has interest in the oil of the region and will not and will refuse any Israeli attack against the Iranian oil facility. Also, Russia can play this game of expanding the conflict between inviting the Ukrainians to be part of the pushing the conflict in Ukraine to be part of the region. Could be an imagined scenario, but it may happen. This is for, let's say, the hard choice, let's say. And we have also the choice of that the Israelis are attacking the oil facilities in Iran, which will create shock prices in the oil market. No one will be able to tolerate this option. Also, even in the Gulf states who are now in the neutral position. But also we can talk about some other conflicts related also to the other risks related to this conflict. We still have the problem of terrorism and extremism in the region. Yes, it happened that ISIS, Qaeda, now declining as organization, but the reason to create to have them around still there. We still have this unfinished, let's say, civil war in Syria. Part of these organizations are still working there in Syria and in Yemen, and they can't find any opportunity to come back again in a way or another, because we have frustrated population against the U.S., Israel, and the Western with the Western power in general. Another thing, we can talk also of the risks of economic instability and the risks of political instability in other countries, for example, like Egypt. We could have very soon a problem of legitimacy in the ruling regime. So we could have this kind of instability that can be also tethered and associated with the ongoing conflict. So the main problem now, no one is fighting for with specific strategy. I think most of the regional power actors are trying to avoid this all-out war in a way or another, but they are trying to, let's say, reestablish their deterrence. The only one who are interested in this conflict because they are not having any, let's say, diplomatic efforts tied with their military efforts, which are the Israelis. They are not talking about any diplomacy for nothing. They are not interested in peace. And this is also creating another risk that we have lost in the last decade. Many Arab countries who became more interested in normalization with Israel, I mean the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, in good faith, and they believe that the normalization with Israel will create a suitable situation for a Palestinian statehood and a Palestinian state and ending this conflict. But it happened that the region now the Israelis are not interested in peace, and I think there is a huge belief in these countries in Egypt or Jordan and in the Gulf state that the Netanyahu government you cannot consider them as a peace partner. One of also the risks that I can point out that Israel with this war, with this aggression, ended the possibilities of coexistence in the region. And this is one of the main potential actually in the region as countries and a region in general. Because in the last decades, we had also after these decades of conflict between the Arab countries and the Israel, that peace is possible. But now it is not possible. But with having these norms of brutalizing and dehumanizing the people of Gaza and now and Palestine and the settlement in the West Bank and the violation of the Muslim and Christian holy sites in Jerusalem. This will be very, very problem that we need the countries of the region who are interested in this, that they will make more effort to persuade their people that this is possible. And for now, it is not that image.
Absolutely. I think that for most people, say under the age of 40, this is the most distant we've seen from peace, in their lifetimes. I want to, for a second, step away from this conflict. In
Yeah.
fact, for the rest of this episode, because obviously that's not the whole story, right? This is
Yes. Yes.
this huge region, and people have other, their ordinary lives to go about. And when we discuss any part of the world, climate change is one of those things that is concerns everybody, along with environmental degradation. I assume that water scarcity, for example, is a serious issue. So what are the big risks from climate change? And since it's an issue that concerns all states to varying degrees, how is it being seen?
Speaking of climate change and environmental deterioration in the region, yes, it is. Let's say it's a fact that the region is one of the most hard hit region in the world by this phenomenon, for the very reason that the Middle East is located in one of the arid areas of the world, where we have this problem of water scarcity, as you rightly said, and we have also the problems of the occasional cases of flooding and drought, like in Iraq, and the rise of sea level and the north coast of Egypt, and the fire in the forest in Algeria. So this happened became like a norm of every to hear this news. But I would say that for myself, and I worked a lot on the idea of climate change as a part of the strategic foresight work here. And I think it is not, let's say, an existential threat in itself. The idea that it is about the response. It is not an existential threat for many reasons, because you are not causing it as a region. The region is the less polluter of the world. Most of the polluters are in the West, or in China, but the region, its contribution to the pollution, it is very, very, very tiny. Uh, Even when it comes to in comparison to its population and its the size of the area in general. So the idea that you need to adapt and to develop a strategy of mitigation with the climate change. So when it comes to the mitigation and adaptation, I think we need to refer to the idea of governance of climate change. And actually, in the last 2 years, we have in this region we have had a momentum of the awareness of climate change. We're having two COPs conferences held, one in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt and the other last year in Dubai, which was very, very big event in the region, and people become more aware of the idea of climate change. Even experts were coming here and there. But the idea that if you talk about governance, you need to talk about resources and an institution that can produce strategies respective of each country to develop their own way of dealing with the mitigation. And you need, when it comes to that, we need to talk about the resources. And in this area, we have a huge gap between, for example, in the Gulf, they are now trying to build a model of sustainable development that can adapt with the fact that these countries are producing oil, but they have also the resources that can use to create a sustainable model of development for their own people and people who are working here. But at the same time, countries like Egypt and Syria and Algeria, they cannot build the same model because they don't have both the expertise and actually the resources needed for such schemes. The idea also that, again, I think it takes us to the first question and the first case. You cannot build this strategy to mitigate climate change alone. You need regional coordination. And it is very surprising that while every country in the region is hit by climate change in a way or another, we haven't seen any kind of serious and huge cooperation or coordinated work to mitigate the climate change, which does not recognize any border between the countries. So in this idea, we will have we will have also to deal with the problem of geopolitics. So you cannot, for example, imagine Iranian and Israelis leaving their conflict aside while discussing climate change. The same goes for like the Turkey and other adversaries in the region, or any adversary in the region. Or, for example, Hamas and Hezbollah leaving their arms and discuss climate change. So it starts with politics and ends with politics, actually. That this is the same also for the idea of economics and geopolitics. You cannot deal with climate change. It's a fact indeed, and its impacts will be hard hit in the region and its population in general. But the idea that you cannot deal with this threat without politics. Yeah.
Yes, I think this is actually, in a sense, an issue all over the world, which is that when states vehemently disagree with each other or are in competition, it's really hard for them to
Actually, and
collaborate.
you are seeing that also in the deliberations of the COPs, that also the political and the economic differences between the countries are ruling their role and ruling their perspective and dealing with the climate change. So actually, let me tell you, actually, in my work, I pointed out that before dealing with climate change, we need to deal also with the politics of climate change as a matter of a human affair. It is not. Yes, we are recognizing it as a scientific fact, but this scientific facts, when it comes to the human society, we need to deal with it not only by technology or by economic resources, but it is also a part of the politics of the society.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think climate change can be separated from politics.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just as a final question to you, I want to ask, we when we hear about the Middle East and North Africa, at least here in India, it's dominated by conflict. We don't talk about things like climate change. We also don't, we're not necessarily aware of some of the more long-term trends that might be pulling in the other direction, that might give us some cause for optimism. So, what are those potentially positive trends that we're missing out? Is it human development? Is it economics? Give us some hope here.
Yes. Yeah, I know it is very for anyone to answer this question, especially with the dust of conflicts has not settled yet. But
Yeah.
yes, the region is full of potentials, as I said in the first. Where it can start with the raw materials, the oil, the mineral wealth in every country, the population, of course. You can pick from here and there, and we have also the financial resources of many countries. But the idea that I can tell you, I think there are two positive potentials, and that can constitute. They are already mega trends in the region, and they are related to its makeup as a region. The first is related to the population, of course, the human resources, and let me tell you also on the other side, one of the huge risks of the region is the brain drain, because these cases of conflict, people are and the region, and this is the idea of being positive trend, that the region has a huge potential of talented, well educated, and well aware, and we're very cultured people, young people, and its people in general are young people under the 20 or under the 30. I think I don't have the exact number, but I think maybe 6% of the population of the region are young, which makes it a young region in general. This is one of the main good potentials of the region. The idea that you need to, let's say, make use of them was creating integrating model of development, and ending the conflict or the political instability or economic marginalization of the young people. This one, and the other one, I think it is more related to let's say vitality or the vibrancy of the Middle Eastern culture. Actually, one of the things, the silver lining of what is happening, it proves that we are, as people, we are resisting the aggression in a way or another. It could be violent. It could be labeled as, let's say, terrorist act by some actors. But actually, people are not submitting to the foreign aggression as part of the third world, and I think we share that with India, China, the people in Africa and Latin America. We're still resisting. This rhetoric of resistance could be for some outdated and more related to the post Cold War and the post World War II and the liberation movement in the 60s and the 70s. But still, we still have a problem of occupation, colonialism. We deal with them. We are resisting it in a way or another. Our culture is very vibrant, are very diverse, are very accepting the idea of coexistence and between between religions and subcultures. We have problem of the makeup of the Arab states, as we have like a problem of modernization. But actually, I think if we can have like a saying in the future of the region as peoples and as indigenous states, let's say that we will do a lot. Uh, some years ago, I found a book talking about the other miracle of the Southeast Asia. And the author in this book were talking that we normally, when we talk about the miracle of Southeast Asia, we are referring to the economic miracles of these small countries that achieved a huge levels of development. But he was saying that these countries actually achieved another level of, let's say, achieved something else, which is a miracle. And that was that they resolved their conflict. I mean, in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, Vietnam and Cambodia and other countries in this region was the most bloody, having the most bloody conflicts. And for the also, this was like an achievement. Then I thought that we could have also another achievement for like that in the region. We're now having like the conflicts in Syria, Libya, Yemen, de-escalating in a way or another without final resolution. But also the core problem is, as I said in the first, is international intervention in the constructive way and the legacy of colonialism and occupation. If we can get rid of that, I think we can also achieve another miracle in the region with the potentials of the population and the resources.
That's a great note to end on. I mean, I think that we need to be realistic. I think the lesson from the last 1 year is that we can't build a facade of peace
Yes.
when there is conflict. But yes, like all other parts of the world, the region will go through its phases of conflict and then economic vitality and
Indeed,
integration. And hopefully, we've hit rock bottom, and we can look forward to better days in the years to come. So we'll end on that note. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of All Things Policy. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm sure it's going to be very informative for a lot of our listeners.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Actually, it is very insightful and issues beyond what is going on every day. And I think it is very good opportunity. I thank you for letting me to talk because, as I said, this is the first time to talk in a public podcast.
Wonderful. It has been a great conversation. Thank you again.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.